Well, it's great to be back in Lismore this morning. Today, I'm joined by the Deputy Premier, Paul Toole, by local members, as well as Professor Mary O'Kane and former Police Commissioner Mick Fuller, who have conducted a review into the floods here in New South Wales. And we're also joined by David Witherden, who's the head of the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Authority. Well, it's been an incredibly challenging time, particularly for our Northern Rivers communities. Yes, there's been flooding across the state, but nowhere has it been worse or as devastating, traumatic and distressing for our communities in the Northern Rivers. What I can say is that this catastrophic event, occurred 6 months ago. And so much progress has been made in such a short period of time. The devastating scenes and the trauma for many people who were affected immediately by that event, the apocalyptic scenes following the flooding that led to a significant clean-up operation. Today, we stand in Lismore with many businesses now either have reopened or on the path to reopening. People have returned to homes, but there is a very, very long journey ahead. There are many people right across our state, over 1,000 people, who are still living out of their home or who are homeless as a result of these events. There is a substantial journey that lies ahead for the people of our state, but I want to make this point. The spirit of the Northern Rivers community has been significant. The heroism, the sacrifice that we saw during those events, I think should make all of us proud to be Australians. People putting other people before themselves. And as Premier, I'm very proud of that spirit of service that we've seen in our community, and particularly here in the Northern Rivers. The power of nature to swamp the beautiful Northern Rivers was devastating. And that will be matched by our commitment and our dedication to rebuild and recreate our communities for the future. That will not happen overnight. But I particularly want to thank Mary O'Kane and Mick Fuller for the work that they've put in relation to this flood report. Today, the government releases that report and also responds. We've accepted every recommendation. Some will take longer to implement than others, but the focus of the government will be to implement these recommendations as quickly as possible. The recommendations are generally in two parts, so I'll give a brief update in relation to those recommendations and the government's implementation. The two major sections of the review refer to how we evolve emergency management in our state firstly, and I'll address that. And then secondly, how we prepare and recover from events of this scale, both in the short term and in the long term, and what the implications are for our state. So in relation to the future of emergency management, there are a number of recommendations that the government will support, but in brief, they are as follows. We'll be establishing a permanent state emergency operations centre. That will be a permanent centre, and it will be led by a new Deputy Police Commissioner here in New South Wales. We'll be reshaping Resilience New South Wales and transforming it into a leaner, nimble agency known as Recovery New South Wales that will focus on the first 100 days post-event. That type of work will obviously include coordination of cleanup and the like. 3, we'll be establishing a new cabinet committee to be known as Task Force Hawk. That will be a committee that has senior cabinet ministers as well as senior public servants. That will be a permanent committee that is ready to respond at any moment, at any time there is a major natural disaster. We'll also be merging the back office of the RFS and the SES to focus on enhancing less focus on administration, more focus on frontline response. And obviously that transition will take some time. I do want to reiterate, there will be no change to front office community-facing RFS and SCS. I'll have something more to say about that soon. The final key part in terms of emergency response is in relation to community training. It's very clear the time that we've spent up in the Northern Rivers, the importance of the community. And I spoke about the spirit of service of the community, but the lack of coordination from government in relation to that. But also, in addition, I'd say training. There are many people who don't have the time to carry out or to commit to being a volunteer, a uniform volunteer. But there are many people who want to have that training, and we'll be working through programs that support members of the community receiving training from the RFS, from the SES, in the ordinary course of their lives. That will ensure that in those circumstances where these major events occur, people have the confidence of the training that they have received during this period. And in addition to that, we will be ensuring that local communities are well set up and supported by a knowledge and understanding of evacuation centres, of being the first responders in those circumstances when a major event hits. It's very clear to me during the time following the flooding in communities right across the Northern Rivers that many communities felt that there was no knowledge and understanding of how do we respond quickly, who sets up the evacuation centre, who's running the recovery centres. So that will all be implemented as well. The second aspect of the report refers to the planning and the future as we move forward. So as part of that, we'll be establishing a permanent reconstruction body. It'll be a legislative body with legislative powers, very much based on the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. There's disaster adaptation plans which will be in place, and this is about making sure we have local and regional solutions. It is raised in areas of a buyback and land swap. That is something the government is committed to. We are committed to ensuring that as we have future development, that it does not occur in areas which are subject to significant flooding. And in addition to that, those people who have lost their homes, who are in dire circumstances, we will work as a result of this report to implement a land swap and buyback scheme that will be targeted in specific areas. I know for many people that will provide uncertainty today in terms of eligibility, but that is something that we need to work through. But I can say as Premier that that is something that we are going to do. And through the Reconstruction Authority, led by David Witherden, that by the end of August, we will open expressions of interest for landholders and also looking at public land which can be made available for land swaps or that buyback scheme. So that work commences today. And I want to make this very clear as well. We are going to rebuild these communities. I said from the outset when I was here that we would be with our people every step of the way, not just in the short term, not just after the flood event when the cameras left towns, but for the long term. And this is a long journey that is in front of us, and we need to make sure we rebuild in a resilient way, in a way that keeps the character and the charm of these wonderful communities in the Northern Rivers. The way that we approach this will take time, but it'll ensure that our strong communities, whether it's Lismore or anywhere else in the Northern Rivers, have a strong and bright future. There are many people who have lived here for generations and want their children and their children to be part of this community going forward, and we will deliver that. We will just ensure that we build back in a stronger and more resilient way. As I said, whilst nature is devastated our beautiful communities in the Northern Rivers, that will be matched by our resolve and determination to rebuild and recreate the wonderful communities of the Northern Rivers. I want to thank Professor O'Kane and Mick Fuller for the work that they have done. Not only have they delivered when I approached them in respect of doing this review, not only have they delivered the report to government 2 months ahead of what I asked them to do, it has exceeded the expectations of the detail that I believed I'd be provided with. They've exceeded expectations. I spoke to both Mary and Mick at the start and said, I don't want a political report. I want a report that goes to the heart to ensure that as we rebuild well and we address the issues that are there in front of us. I don't care about political sensitivities. I care about our people and looking after them, getting them back into homes and rebuilding our communities in the Northern Rivers. That is what's most important. For some in this report, it'll be hard reading. I accept that. But we cannot keep doing things the same way that we've done in the past. We need to do things differently. And that's exactly what the New South Wales government will do off the back of this report. I want to thank our volunteers. There's been a lot of commentary, which I think is completely unfair in relation to our frontline volunteers. We are incredibly blessed as a state and as a country to have so many people who risk their lives each and every day to look after every one of us. And whether that's our SES, our RFS, or all our volunteer organisations, you are truly heroes. And this report today being handed down, that we thank you. We thank you for everything that we do. And I do want to ask as well, if you haven't thought about joining a volunteer organisation like the SES or the RFS, please do so. These are great opportunities for people to look after others, and it's a great aspect of the Australian culture and the Australian way of life that is unique to anywhere else in the world. So to all our volunteers who are always there when we're going through tough times, on behalf of the government, of the members of the parliament, from right across party political lines, can we thank you for everything that you do. Finally, before I pass to the Deputy Premier for some comments, can I thank the community and all those who have been affected, particularly here in the Northern Rivers. I know it has been an incredibly traumatic and difficult time. I have had the opportunity to meet with so many people during the course of the last 6 months. The progress that has been made, the resilience and the steely determination of our people is something to behold. And my commitment to you as Premier is that I will be here every step of the way as we move through. I said when we came up following that catastrophic event that I would keep coming back, and my commitment is I will keep coming back again until we implement all of these recommendations, until every single person in the Northern Rivers is back in a home. This will take time, but as far as I'm concerned as Premier, this is the top priority for our government. We should always be judged on how we look after our most vulnerable people, and the trauma and the distress and the challenges that have faced our people in the Northern Rivers in the past and continue as we move through this next phase. Rest assured that the New South Wales government will be with you every step of the way.